Hello there, it's Ace from the Face to Ace YouTube channel, and today we got a giant video where we are going to cover Star Wars The Force Awakens 10 years later. It's going to be a huge deep dive, and I hope you're all going to enjoy it. Get your popcorn ready for this one. And let's start with Chapter 1, Episode 7, Pre-Disney. The story of Star Wars The Force Awakens truly begins decades before its 2015 release. In the early days of Star Wars, creator George Lucas had floated the idea of a 9-episode saga. Back in the 1970s, Lucas even told actor Mark Hamill that there would be 3 or 4 trilogies, and that Hamill could cameo in one of the episodes. He imagined the film around 2011. However, by the time the original trilogy was complete in 1983, Lucas's enthusiasm for continuing the saga had diminished a little bit. He had sketched out a rough story treatment for episodes 7, 8, and 9 during the making of the originals, but the exhausting production of those films and personal factors led him to cancel the sequel trilogy plans by 1981, allegedly. In public, Lucas often insisted that Star Wars was the tragedy of Darth Vader, told in 6 parts, and that there was no story beyond Episode 6. For years, he repeated that he had no plans to make Episodes 7, 8, and 9, shutting down fan hopes for a sequel trilogy. Yet the idea of Episode 7 lingered in the fandom's imagination. Throughout the 1990s and 2000s, expanded universe novels, like Timothy Zahn's popular Thrawn trilogy, gave a glimpse of what sequels might look like. But Lucas treated those as separate and maintained he wouldn't make another film. After completing the prequel trilogy in 2005, Lucas seemed content to let the film saga rest. He focused on producing the Clone Wars animated series and smaller projects. By around 2011, something began to change. Lucas quietly started developing new Star Wars story ideas once again, specifically with an Episode 7 in mind. At the time, he was approaching 70 and contemplating retirement from blockbuster filmmaking. In May of 2011, Disney CEO Bob Iger took Lucas to breakfast and candidly asked if Lucas would consider selling Lucasfilm to Disney. Lucas wasn't ready to fully retire yet, but this conversation planted a seed. Behind closed doors, Lucas began drafting story treatments for a sequel trilogy as sort of a last hurrah or transitional project, allegedly. He even considered directing Episode 7 himself for a May 2015 release, effectively to get the next trilogy started before stepping away. Once again, allegedly. In early 2012, Lucas brought in the writer who won an Oscar for Little Miss Sunshine and began a script based on Lucas's story outline. He also reached out to the original trilogy's beloved cast. In a rumored lunch meeting in August 2012, Lucas asked actor Mark Hamill and other actor Carrie Fisher if they'd be willing to reprise their roles if new films went forward. Both agreed on the spot, allegedly. He later got a yes from the famously hesitant Harrison Ford by promising Han would have a satisfying character arc with meaningful closure. Suddenly, the once diminished idea of Episode 7 was becoming very real, supposedly. Lucas was laying the groundwork for a sequel set 30 years after Return of the Jedi. It's fascinating to imagine this period. Episode 7 pre-Disney was a brief window when George Lucas himself was allegedly initiating a continuation of Star Wars. Fans at the time had no clue this was happening. Lucas had publicly sworn off more episodes. Yet, behind the scenes, he maybe was crafting the next chapter. In hindsight, these moves were tied to Lucas planning his retirement and the future of his company. He later explained that at 67, he realized Star Wars lived beyond him, and that it was time to set up the transition to new caretakers while he was still alive. Little did we know, Star Wars Episode 7 was on the horizon, but it would soon take a different form than Lucas initially envisioned, under entirely new ownership. Chapter 2, George Lucas after the prequels. To understand how The Force Awakens came to be, we must understand George Lucas's state of mind after the prequel trilogy that went from 1999 to 2005. The prequels, episodes 1, 2, 3, were financially successful but received harsh criticism from many fans. Lucas faced a wave of backlash over everything from Jar Jar Binks to midi-chlorians, and even changes in his special editions of the original trilogy. By 2005, Lucas was tired of defending his vision. In the years following Episode 3, Revenge of the Sith, he often sounded frustrated and hurt by fan base reactions. In a 2012 interview, Lucas famously said he was retiring from big budget films and Star Wars in particular. The New York Times quoted him saying, "Why would I make any more when everybody yells at you all the time and says what a terrible person you are?" This quote reveals how personally he took the criticism. Lucas felt that the fans have turned on him for ruining their childhood, a refrain that emerged from each tweak and each prequel. He defended his right as an artist to make Star Wars the way he wanted. But negativity clearly took a toll. Entertainment Weekly noted that Lucas's haters got their wish, as Lucas declared there would be no more Star Wars movies from him. It's a rather heartbreaking moment. The man who created Star Wars felt hounded into stepping away from the very franchise he created. Freed from Star Wars, Lucas pursued passion projects. In 2012, he released Red Tails, a film about airmen that he struggled for decades to get made. Unfortunately, it performed weakly at the box office. Around the same time, Lucas spoke about focusing on smaller, more personal, experimental films, essentially going back to the kind of indie filmmaking he loved before Star Wars exploded. He also indicated he wanted to spend more time with family. Lucas was about to remarry and would soon have a new daughter. All signs pointed to a man preparing to leave the blockbuster business behind. Yet, even as he voiced resignation, Lucas still cared about the future of Star Wars. He oversaw the animated Clone Wars series and guarded the franchise's legacy. In public, he said he wouldn't let anyone else make episodes 7 through 9. Privately, though, as we saw in Chapter 1, allegedly by 2011 to 2012, Lucas had begun considering those sequels, perhaps as a way to do it right one last time and secure Star Wars' future. One major step was hiring Kathleen Kennedy, a respected producer and longtime friend, in 2012 as a co-chair of Lucasfilm. Lucas was essentially planning his exit strategy. He would hand the keys of Lucasfilm to Kathleen Kennedy, whom he trusted to uphold his vision. This transition was formalized in mid-2012 when Kennedy became Lucasfilm's president-in-waiting. It's important to grasp Lucas's emotions in this period. He had given decades to Star Wars. The prequel backlash left him feeling unappreciated and even bitter. He told interviews that Star Wars fans don't owe him anything, but then said that he doesn't owe them anything either, a clear sign of hurt feelings. So by 2012, Lucas was ready to step back, sell the company, and let Star Wars be taken over by a new generation. As he put it, "I'm moving away from the business, from the company, from all this kind of stuff." The irony is that this very act, letting others continue Star Wars, would pave the way for The Force Awakens. Lucas was relinquishing control so that Star Wars could potentially thrive without him. It was a moment of profound change. After the prequels, the creator himself walked away, hoping that in other hands, Star Wars might be reborn afresh. Chapter 3: The Disney Purchase. The turning point for The Force Awakens and Star Wars as a whole came on October 30th, 2012, when the Walt Disney Company announced it was acquiring Lucasfilm for $4.05 billion. This bombshell news stunned the entertainment world and fans alike. Practically overnight, Star Wars went from being the independent vision of George Lucas to becoming a part of the Disney Corporation. The deal meant that Disney, which already owned Pixar and Marvel, would now also lead Star Wars. And crucially, Disney wasted no time in unveiling their plan: a new Star Wars trilogy with Episode 7 slated for 2015. Only 3 years away. Behind the scenes, the Disney purchase was carefully orchestrated. As mentioned, Bob Iger had opened the door in 2012, and by mid-2012, George Lucas agreed to sell Lucasfilm on a few important conditions. One stipulation was that Kathleen Kennedy would take over as Lucasfilm president to ensure creative continuity. Another was that Lucas's story treatments for episodes 7 through 9 would be used as the basis for the new films. Disney's leadership agreed in principle, though, as we'll see later, Lucas's outlines were largely set aside during development. For Lucas, selling Lucasfilm was like passing on a legacy. "It's now time for me to pass Star Wars on to a new generation of filmmakers," he stated in a Disney official press release. He expressed confidence that with Kathleen Kennedy at the helm and Disney's resources, Star Wars would certainly live on and flourish for many generations to come. Despite any bittersweet feelings, Lucas emphasized he always believed Star Wars could outlive him, and he wanted to set up the transition during his lifetime, as we saw in the first chapter. From Disney's perspective, the acquisition was a goldmine of IP. Iger praised Lucas's extraordinary passion, vision, and storytelling, and talked about combining Lucasfilm's world-class content like Star Wars with Disney's global marketing and distribution. Disney saw Star Wars as a uniquely powerful franchise that spans film, TV, video games, theme park, and of course, merchandising. And indeed, they got not just Star Wars, but also Industrial Light and Magic, Skywalker Sound, and all of Lucasfilm's division. It was a huge deal that signaled Disney's strategy of banking on proven brands. When the news hits, fans reacted with a mix of excitement and cautious optimism. The idea of new Star Wars movies, and so soon, was thrilling. Episode 7 was officially announced for 2015, which, like we said, was only 3 years away. Many couldn't believe it. Star Wars had been dormant on the big screen since 2005, but some fans were nervous. What would Star Wars under Disney even look like? Would it be Disney-fied, as some fans would say? Would Mickey Mouse be walking out of an X-Wing with a lightsaber? Most doubted that, but there were people that were confused a little bit by this. Others were relieved that George Lucas, who had become a controversial figure among segments of the fandom, was stepping aside. It's worth noting that Lucas himself planned to remain involved in an advisory role. The press release said he would be a creative consultant on the new films. However, in reality, Lucas's involvement was very minimal. He later recounted that Disney wasn't that keen to have me involved, and that if he stuck around, he'd only muck everything up, since he no longer had final control. So Lucas took a hands-off approach. He handed over his story ideas, then walked away to enjoy semi-retirement. In his words, "When I sold Star Wars, I basically said, I'm done. I can't do this anymore." The Disney purchase of Lucasfilm is a landmark moment in Hollywood history. For Star Wars, it meant that a new era was beginning. The franchise now had the backing of one of the biggest companies on Earth, with plans for not just a sequel trilogy, but also spin-off films and beyond. It also meant Star Wars would likely be more collaborative, shaped by various filmmakers, not just George Lucas's singular vision. The stage was set for Episode 7 to be the first Star Wars film produced without Lucas in charge. The pressure was enormous. This movie had to satisfy old fans, introduce new heroes, and kick off a profitable new chapter for Disney. In a real sense, The Force Awakens would be a test of whether Star Wars could thrive under new leadership. It was a make-or-break moment for the franchise's legacy in the modern era. Chapter 4: Assembling a Team. Director, crew, and cast. With Lucasfilm now under Disney, Kathleen Kennedy moved quickly to assemble the team that would bring Star Wars Episode 7 to life. Her first major task? Find a director to helm the hugely anticipated comeback of Star Wars. In January 2013, it was announced that J.J. Abrams would direct Star Wars Episode 7. Abrams was a natural choice in many ways. A talented filmmaker who had rebooted the Star Trek series, was known for his nostalgic, crowd-pleasing style. But interestingly, Abrams initially turned down the job. He later revealed that Kathleen Kennedy first approached him. He said no because he didn't want to be the guy that does sequels, and felt it might be too daunting of a project. Abrams had just directed 2 Star Trek films and was wary of taking on another beloved sci-fi franchise. When Kathleen called, I did something I don't normally do. I looked at my career, Abrams recalled. I really did feel like that sounded like the wrong idea. What changed his mind? According to Abrams, a conversation with his wife convinced him he'd regret saying no. Abrams is a lifelong Star Wars fan, and the opportunity to be part of bringing the magic back was too special to pass up. He later described his goal for The Force Awakens. I wanted people to feel the magic of what Star Wars was. The sense of romance, the sense of heart, the loyalty, the sweetness, the friendship, the unexpected scenarios, the discoveries, the sense of impossible scale made possible. That quote beautifully sums up Abrams' approach. He saw his task as rekindling the wonder and heart that made the 1977 original so impactful. With Abrams signed on as director, and also as a producer, the project gained a leader who combined fanboy enthusiasm with the Hollywood savvy. Meanwhile, the writing team was taking shape. As mentioned, Michael Arndt, who had been writing a draft since late 2012 based on George Lucas's outline, he is an Oscar-winning screenwriter and is known for such projects as Toy Story 3 and Little Miss Sunshine, and he drove into crafting the story. However, by mid-2013, it became clear that he was struggling to get a finished script quickly enough. He reportedly told Abrams and Kennedy that he needed 18 more months to complete the screenplay to his satisfaction, far more time than the tight schedule allowed. Disney was firm on that 2015 release. They couldn't delay it too much in their mind. Ultimately, after about 8 months of work, he stepped away from the project in October of 2013. On October 24th, 2013, Lucasfilm announced his departure, and that J.J. Abrams and veteran Star Wars writer Lawrence Kasdan would take over script duties. Kasdan, of course, co-wrote The Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi, making him a reassuring addition for fans. The Abrams-Kasdan duo reworked the story significantly over the following months, keeping some of the original concepts but altering others. For example, there was early reports that had Luke Skywalker appear much earlier, but they decided to hold Luke back until the very end of the film to keep focus on the new characters. While the script evolved, assembling the cast and crew was the next piece of the puzzle. Kathleen Kennedy and J.J. Abrams were committing to finding the right actors to launch this new generation. They began casting in early 2014, and the process was exhausting. Thousands of actors were seen for the new lead roles, including open auditions held in multiple cities for unknown talent. Ultimately, the filmmakers took a bold approach. They cast relative newcomers as the trio of young heroes. Daisy Ridley, an almost completely unknown 21-year-old British actor, won the lead role of Rey. Ridley's powerful audition, practically her intensity in an emotional scene, blew Abrams' mind, convincing them she could carry the film. For the role of Finn, codenamed Thomas in auditions, they chose John Boyega, a British-Nigerian actor known mainly for the indie sci-fi film Attack the Block. Boyega had the right mix of charisma and vulnerability to play a conflicted stormtrooper turned hero. He later shared that after his first audition, he waited 7 anxious months to hear if he got the part. Boyega's patience paid off, and he brought a fresh energy as one of the first black leads in Star Wars film history. Rounding out the new trio, they cast the more established Oscar Isaac, known at the time for his film Inside Llewyn Davis. As Poe Dameron, an ace X-Wing pilot, Isaac was a huge fan of Star Wars and even improvised some humor into his audition to shape Poe's roguish personality. Of course, The Force Awakens also crucially brought back cast members. Harrison Ford, Carrie Fisher, and Mark Hamill all signed on to reprise Han Solo, Leia, and Luke Skywalker, respectively. For fans, this was monumental, seeing the original heroes on screen together again after 30+ years. Abrams and Kennedy also cast a host of interesting actors in supporting roles. Adam Driver, known at the time for HBO's Girls, was cast as the mysterious villain Kylo Ren, later revealed as Han and Leia's son. Rising star Donald Gleason took the part of First Order General Hux. Veteran icon Max von Sydow was tapped for a small but important role in the opening scene, and motion capture legend Andy Serkis would portray the shadowy Supreme Leader Snoke. Notably, Lupita Nyong'o's fresh off an Oscar win for 12 Years a Slave joined as Maz Kanata, a CGI alien character, showing that the team wasn't shying away from cutting-edge effects for new creatures, even as they embraced practical methods elsewhere in the film. Abrams also paid attention to the crew and overall aesthetic. Cinematographer Dan Middle was hired, and Abrams insisted they shoot on 35mm film, not digital, to recapture the grain and warmth of the original trilogy's look. He even used vintage lenses and film stock similar to those used in the 1977 film. For special effects, Abrams stuck a balance. Industrial Light and Magic would do extensive digital effects, of course, but Abrams was adamant about using practical effects and sets as much as feasible. Another deliberate nod to the original trilogy's practical feel. Real sets, practical effects, everything changed, but nothing's changed. As one of the behind-the-scenes reel proudly stated, the production built full-scale sets of the Millennium Falcon, created creatures with prosthetics and animatronics, and even constructed BB-8, the new astromech droid, as a rolling practical robot for many scenes. This approach was a pointed response to critiques of the heavy CGI. Abrams wanted The Force Awakens to feel grounded and real. By mid-2014, the core team was in place. J.J. Abrams at the helm, cast and co-writing, a cast blending beloved veterans and charismatic newcomers, a top-notch crew committed to mixing old-school movie magic with modern techniques. It's worth highlighting one more crucial team member, John Williams. The legendary composer agreed to return to score Episode 7. Williams' involvement lent an air of continuity and legacy. His music is the soul of Star Wars, and having him compose new themes for Rey, Kylo Ren, and others was a dream come true for fans. The assembled team carried a heavy weight of expectations, but also an electric excitement. They were in essence crafting one of the biggest legacy sequels ever. As Abrams said around that time, Star Wars was not just another job, it was a crucial touchstone he felt duty-bound to honor. The production would soon prove to be an adventure of its own, full of challenges and nostalgia, as the Dream Team set out to awaken Star Wars for a new era. Chapter 5, The Production, Making The Force Awakens. Once the cast and crew were set, The Force Awakens moved into production in 2014, and it was a remarkable blend of the old and new. Principal photography began in May of 2014. The very first scenes were shot in a vast desert, which stood in for a new desert planet, Jakku. Under the scorching sun, Abrams filmed key sequences of Rey scavenging starship wreckage and the frenetic escape of Poe and Finn. Right from the get-go, the production signaled its philosophy. They built practical sets in the desert, including a half-buried Star Destroyer, and even a working BB-8 droid rolling across real sand. A direct contrast to the all-digital environments of the prequels. As Entertainment Weekly later observed, the film looks and feels like a direct continuation of the original trilogy, and fans will appreciate the use of practical effects and locations. Filming then moved to Pinewood Studios in England, the historic studio where much of the original trilogy was made. Multiple massive sound stages were used to construct sets such as the interior of the Millennium Falcon, the Starkiller base corridors, and Maz Kanata's castle. The art department lovingly recreated the Falcon's cockpit down to the last toggle switch, to the delight of Harrison Ford, who said stepping back on the Falcon set was surreal. Practical creature effects were done under Neil Scadlin's Creature Shop. In Maz's castle scene, for instance, they built dozens of animatronic aliens, operated by puppeteers, bringing to mind the cantina scene of A New Hope. In July of 2014, the production team undertook a special trip to a remote corner of Ireland. It was a rocky island in the Atlantic. This would serve as a breathtaking location for Luke Skywalker's secluded hideaway. The crew had to hike up 600 ancient stone steps to reach the cliff top, where Mark Hamill, as in Luke Skywalker, and Daisy Ridley, as in Rey, would film the silent climax scene. Those few moments on screen, which was Rey offering Luke's old lightsaber, were actually shot in a very tight window, with limited crew due to the island's protected status and rough conditions. It stands as a testament to the production's commitment to real locations. That whole visual of the ocean around Luke is 100% real, not a green screen like most shots in the prequels. Productions was not without hiccups. In June of 2014, during filming at Pinewood, Harrison Ford suffered an accident on set. A hydraulic door of the Millennium Falcon unexpectedly closed on his leg, breaking his ankle quite badly. This incident made international headlines. Ford at 71 had to be airlifted to a hospital and underwent surgery. Director J.J. Abrams later joked that in trying to help Ford, he actually fractured a vertebrae in his own back, demonstrating how heavy the Falcon's practical door was. The injury forced the productions to halt filming 2 weeks and then shoot around Ford's absence for nearly 2 months. Luckily, Ford recovered faster than expected and returned to set in August, where he filmed Han Solo's remaining scenes, including some of the most emotional moments of the film. Despite this disruption, the team managed to stay on schedule by rearranging the shooting order. They focused on scenes with Rey, Finn, and Kylo while Ford was out. In retrospect, that accident was perhaps a blessing in disguise. Abrams said Ford came back energized, and the delay allowed some rewrite tweaks to sharpen certain scenes. Throughout the production, secrecy was incredibly tight. The script was kept under lock and key. Actors had code names, for example, when they shot on location to film resistant base scenes with X-Wings. Many casual observers didn't even know Mark Hamill was filming, since Luke's role was kept top secret. He wasn't in any early publicity, leading to a lot of fan speculation about Luke's absence. The secrets reached amusing levels. For instance, script pages were printed on red paper to prevent photocopying, and drones were deployed to fly over outdoor sets to ensure no paparazzi drones were snooping. Despite a few leaks, the major story surprises, like Han Solo's fate and Luke's cameo, remained unspoiled, which helped preserve the magic for audiences later. A major emphasis of the production was capturing the Star Wars feel. Cinematographer Dan Mindell's use of real 35mm film and actual lighting effects played a big role. For example, during the lightsaber fights, the crew used illuminating prop sabers that would cast colored light on the actors, giving a dynamic glow that CGI sabers in the prequels lacked. Stunt work and wire work were used for many action scenes. When Rey and Finn run from the exploding TIE fighter on Jakku, that was a real practical explosion behind them, not just VFX, which gave the actors something real to react to, and it shows on screen with genuine panic in their faces. That's not to say CGI wasn't used at all. In fact, The Force Awakens has hundreds of visual effects shots, but Abrams approached CGI with a philosophy of use CGI to enhance, not replace. He mentioned using CGI often to remove things like rigging puppet rods or to extend sets, rather than to create everything from scratch. One example is that the character Maz Kanata, Lupita Nyong'o's performed Maz via motion capture on set, interacting with other actors, and then the character was rendered digitally. The result is a CG character that feels integrated into a physical environment. Similarly, the villainous Supreme Leader Snoke was entirely CGI performed by Andy Serkis, but his scenes were shot on a giant motion capture stage with careful lighting to meld with the rest of the footage. In essence, production strove to make the audience feel the presence of real sets and creatures, even as ILM's cutting-edge digital artistry filled in the cosmic landscapes and epic space battles. One fun anecdote from the production involves Mark Hamill. Though Luke has no dialogue in the film, Hamill was very much part of the table read when the cast first assembled. A now famous black and white photo shows the actors script in hand and Hamill narrating the stage directions, which recently the sequel to Spaceballs just parodied. At Pinewood, he was present off camera during Daisy Ridley's emotionally charged scene touching the Skywalker lightsaber to help her by reading lines and just offering support. A generous act from the saga's elder statesman to a new lead. By all accounts, the old and new cast bonded closely. John Boyega in particular became something of a on-set clown. Keeping things light, he even smuggled his friend into the background as a stormtrooper in one scene as a joke. After roughly 7 months, principal photography wrapped in November of 2014. The very final shot filmed, it was reportedly a close-up pickup shot of Rey's hand. A decidedly unglamorous end to an epic shoot often happens for these big-budget movies. To celebrate the end of filmmaking, the crew made Star Wars wrap shirts and had a little ceremony where they painted the iconic logo of the Pinewood soundstage door. It was an emotional moment. Everyone knew they had been part of something special. Star Wars was back, and the sense was on set was that they have captured something magical by balancing nostalgia with fresh energy. As actor Oscar Isaac said, in one of his favorite parts of the whole experience was simply the run-up to the film's release, feeling the growing excitement and being proud of what they made. In post-production, John Williams recorded another legendary score. The sessions were in mid-2015, produced beautiful new themes, like Rey's theme, that instantly became part of the Star Wars musical canon. Editors Marion Brandon and Mary Jo Markey worked with Abrams to tighten the pacing and find the right mix of humor, heart, and spectacle. By late 2015, everything was ready. The production phase of The Force Awakens had been a whirlwind that bridged generations of filmmaking techniques, from building actual X-Wing fighters and blowing up practical explosions to innovating with motion capture characters and massive CGI battle sequences. This careful crafting laid a strong foundation. Now all that remained was to share the film with the world and hope that audience would feel the same magic that the filmmakers felt on set. Chapter 6, The Hype. A Galaxy Awakes. Even before the movie hit theaters, The Force Awakens became a full-fledged cultural phenomenon thanks to an expertly orchestrated hype campaign and genuine fan excitement. After a decade without a Star Wars movie, anticipation was insane. Disney and Lucasfilm stoked that excitement masterfully. It all began with a teaser trailer released over a year in advance on Black Friday, November 28th, 2014. I remember sitting in a mall, like a cafeteria type, and I remember it popping up probably on like my news feed on Facebook, and I thought it was fake, but that 88-second teaser broke the internet. Fans around the globe watched with giddy joy as iconic sights and sounds returned. The Millennium Falcon soaring to John Williams' fanfare, a mysterious new dark figure igniting a strange crossguard lightsaber in a snowy forest, and the booming voiceover, "There has been an awakening. Have you felt it?" The teaser introduced us to glimpses of Rey, Finn, famously panting in a stormtrooper suit in the desert in the opening shot. It scared a lot of people. What a jump scare. BB-8 rolling along and more. In one day, it garnered tens of millions of views. The image of John Boyega in stormtrooper armor sparked dumb conversations, but Boyega silenced any trolls with a cheeky Instagram post. To whom it may concern, get used to it. Fans overall were ecstatic. Star Wars was awakening, indeed. Over the course of 2015, each new piece of footage or information became an event. In April 2015, at Star Wars Celebration, which is a large fan convention held every couple of years, and that year it was in Anaheim, director J.J. Abrams and the cast unveiled the second teaser trailer live to a stadium full of die-hard fans. This teaser was a pure emotional punch. It opened with Luke's voice, a line from Return of the Jedi about the Force running strong in his family, and ended with the crowd-pleasing shot of Han Solo and Chewbacca back on the Falcon, with Han saying, "Chewie, we're home." That single line induced pandemonium. Videos of the event show fans literally screaming, some in tears at seeing Harrison Ford as Han Solo again after so long. The phrase "Chewie, we're home" instantly entered the pop culture zeitgeist as a summary of Star Wars returning home to its fans. The teaser also revealed the charred mask of Darth Vader. On social media and YouTube, fans dissected every frame. Even mainstream press noted the goosebump factor was off the charts. Throughout the summer of 2015, the hype only grew. At the San Diego Comic-Con in July, The Force Awakens had a massive panel. Rather than showing a new trailer, Abrams debuted a special behind-the-scenes reel that doubled down on the film's nostalgic, handcrafted ethos. The reel showed quick shots of things like real explosion, creature puppets, and sets, with Mark Hamill's voice narrating real sets, practical effects. Fans ate it up. It reassured everyone that this film respected what came before. Then Abrams one-upped expectations by inviting the entire 6,000-person Comic-Con audience to a surprise Star Wars concert outside, complete with fireworks and the San Diego Symphony playing classic themes while attendees waved lightsabers. Talk about a hype builder. Marketing tie-ins were everywhere by the fall. In early September 2015, Disney staged Force Friday, a global merchandise release day where new toys and collectibles hit shelves at midnight. Fans lined up at stores like it was Black Friday, eager to buy BB-8 droids or Kylo Ren lightsabers. It was essentially a Star Wars merchandise holiday. Major brands from cereal to cosmetics jumped on the bandwagon with Star Wars-themed products. And yet, none of this saturation dampened enthusiasm. If anything, it amplified it. After all, Star Wars had been relatively quiet for years now, and now it's everywhere. Or like the 1999 craziness of the Phantom Menace marketing. As one retrospective put it, this December marks a decade since Star Wars Episode 7 arrived, and Star Wars was quite literally everywhere. It was the most hyped movie event in recent memory. The final trailer dropped in October 2015 during Monday Night Football, and it also had the launch of advanced ticket sales. What happened next made Hollywood history. Within hours, The Force Awakens blew past all pre-sale records. Ticket sites like Fandango crashed under the demand. Within the first day, US advanced ticket sales reached 6.5 million on IMAX alone, and by a month out from release, the film had over 50 million in pre-sales, doubling the previous record, which was The Dark Knight Rises at 25 million. The Wall Street Journal noted that this pace was obliterating records and fueling speculation that The Force Awakens could challenge Avatar for the all-time box office crown. By the time the movie opened, advanced sales in the US were estimated around 100 million. Essentially, Episode 7 had sold out thousands of showings before a single audience member had even seen it. Theater chains added 3 a.m., 5 a.m. screenings to meet demand. Some multiplexes ran the film on almost every screen continuously opening weekend. But the hype wasn't just about numbers and marketing. It was deeply emotional and communal. Older fans who grew up with the originals felt a surge of nostalgia seeing Han, Luke, and Leia return. Younger fans raised on the prequels or animated series were eager to see a Star Wars release in theaters for the first time in their lives, perhaps. There was a sense that The Force Awakens would be more than a movie. It was an event bringing generations together. One vivid example was a group of fans who camped outside of Hollywood's TCL Chinese Theater for days, even weeks before the premiere, echoing the lines for the prequels in 1999 and 2002. They dubbed their waiting party The Line Awakens, and over 130 people took part, some even getting married in line during the wait. It became a mini community, raising money for charity and celebrating Star Wars as collective joy. As the premiere approached, a Guardian reporter in Los Angeles described the buzz as almost tangible. Posters all over town, fans in cosplay parading around Hollywood Boulevard, and the general feeling that this was the most glamorous, sought-after premiere in years. Online, social media lit up with fan art, theories, and a general countdown mentality. The hashtag Force Awakens was trending for months. Every TV spot or character poster release became a news story online. It's fair to say no film in the 2010s had this kind of global hype, except perhaps Avengers Endgame later on. But The Force Awakens was arguably even more unique because it resurrected a dormant legend. In an era where Hollywood churns out sequels and reboots regularly, The Force Awakens stood out by how passionately people were invested in it. There was a widespread hope. Can this movie recapture the magic? By all indications from marketing and early buzz, the answer was looking like a yes. Even cynical corners of the internet were cautiously optimistic. The trailers have struck all the right chords, emotional and narrative, to feel both familiar and new. As one critic later wrote, the stage was set for an opening like no other. Fans across the world felt united by this shared excitement. For those camping out in Hollywood, to families buying tickets for Christmas week showings, to kids putting on Rey or Finn costumes, it was as if Star Wars had once again become a universal language. The hype wasn't just marketing manipulation, it was genuine cultural enthusiasm, and it truly brought people together across generations under the banner of that familiar, glowing title, Star Wars. Chapter 7, The Release, an event for the ages. Finally, in December 2015, the moment arrived. Star Wars The Force Awakens premiered and then opened worldwide, and it felt like the world paused to attend a collective movie-going celebration. The global premiere was held in Los Angeles on December 14th, 2015, in a style befitting the occasion. They actually closed off several city blocks in Hollywood, rolled out one of the longest red carpets ever, and had a giant tent around the entrance to keep the event under wraps. It was reported as the biggest premiere in Hollywood history in terms of scale and security. The original cast and new cast walked out the red carpet, greeted by stormtroopers and droids. George Lucas himself attended, passing the torch in a way despite his complex feelings. By all accounts, when the lights went down at the premiere and that familiar opening crawl appeared with Episode 7, there were goosebumps and tears in the audience. And notably, for the first time, the film did not start with the 20th Century Fox fanfare, a small culture shock moment for old fans, as the Star Wars theme started cold after the Lucasfilm logo. A few days later, December 18, 2015, the film opened to the general public in North America, with Europe a day earlier, etc. What unfolded was nothing short of a box office historic moment. The Force Awakens smashed record after record in its opening weekend. It grossed an astronomical $247.9 million domestically in the first weekend, blowing past the previous record, which was Jurassic World's $208 million earlier in 2015. Its opening day alone was $119 million, including a record of $57 million from Thursday night previews. Every metric was jaw-dropping. Largest Thursday previews, largest single-day gross, largest IMAX opening, you name it. In just 20 days, it became the highest grossing film of all time in the US, surpassing Avatar's $760.5 million lifetime gross. And that was without a re-release or 3D surcharge advantage that Avatar had. Truly a insane moment. The official Star Wars site thanked fans proudly, noting that these milestones and humbly saying, "There has indeed been an awakening, and it's all thanks to you." Globally, The Force Awakens was a juggernaut as well, and ended up grossing about $2.07 billion worldwide, making it at the time the third highest grossing film in history worldwide, beyond only Avatar and Titanic. Notably, it has set an all-time opening weekend worldwide record with around 529 million globally in 3 days. It was number one in basically every market except one notable exception, China, where Star Wars had less of a nostalgic foothold. It did decently, but not spectacularly. Nonetheless, in many countries, it was the top film of 2015. In the UK, for instance, it had the biggest opening in UK history and eventually became, at the time, the highest grossing film ever there, even outdoing the James Bond and Harry Potter films, which are huge in Britain. Across the board, the release was a record-breaking triumph. But beyond the numbers, the experience of seeing The Force Awakens in those early days was something special. Many theaters had 24-hour screenings, fans showed up in cosplay by the thousands, there were spontaneous lightsaber duels in theater lobbies, and collective gasps or cheers during the film. When the iconic characters appeared on screen, audiences often felt erupted in applause. Han Solo's first appearance, Leia's entrance, and especially the climactic scene with Luke. Even though it's silent in many showings, people still cheered or were stunned. It was common to see multiple generations attending together. Parents who saw the originals in '77 bringing their kids who grew up with the prequels or Clone Wars, all equally excited. It felt like Star Wars was once again a communal mythology to be shared live. One striking memory shared by many fans in those first showings, when the film ended on the mysterious cliffhanger of Rey holding out the lightsaber to Luke and the screen cut to black, there was a split second of silence and then thunderous applause. People were clapping, crying, high-fiving strangers. It was that kind of atmosphere critics sometimes call this event cinema, and The Force Awakens amplified it. I remember sitting there after the movie ended and just watching the credits roll for a second, and I didn't want to leave. I remember my friend telling me, "You ready to go?" And I kind of just looked at him for a second and said, I just didn't want to leave. It was just pure positive enthusiasm all the way around. Critically, The Force Awakens was also receiving very positive initial reactions, which only amplified the good vibes of the release. Early Twitter reactions from the premiere were enthusiastic, and by release day, the review embargo lifted, revealing a strong critical consensus. On Rotten Tomatoes, it opened at a high 98% fresh in the first few days. It would settle down to around 93% after more reviews. This critical phrase reassured any hesitant viewers and helped drive even more people to the theaters in the following weeks. It's also worth noting some cultural impacts of the release. Star Wars merchandise sold out in many places during the Christmas season following the premiere. BB-8 toys became the must-have holiday gift, for example. Late-night talk shows were doing Star Wars sketches. The film's young stars, Boyega and Ridley, became overnight celebrities, featured on every magazine cover from Time to Vanity Fair. It was as if Star Wars had re-entered the cultural bloodstream in a way we haven't seen since the early 1980s. For the fandom specifically, the release weekend was almost cathartic. After years of divisions over the prequels or special editions, here was a Star Wars film that largely united the fan base in joy. Fans who had been estranged by the prequels found themselves falling in love with Star Wars all over again. New fans discovered what the hoopla was all about. Social media saw a remarkable outpouring of affection. Fan art of Rey and BB-8, tributes to Han Solo, we'll discuss that moment soon, and so much excitement for what would come next. Of course, nothing is unanimous. There was some critical voices who felt it was too nostalgic or safe, and we'll cover that in the next chapter. But during the release moment, those voices were only few. One could say The Force Awakens, at least for a short time, brought balance to the Star Wars fandom. People were mostly just happy and relieved that Star Wars was cool again, in their eyes. In summary, the release of The Force Awakens was more than just a movie premiere. It was such a cultural event on a massive scale. It broke box office records with light speed momentum, but beyond that, it rekindled that communal spirit of movie-going. Strangers stood in lines for hours talking about the Jedi and the Sith, Movie theaters echoed with John Williams' fanfare and cheers. A long time ago, Star Wars created the summer blockbuster, but now in 2015, it arguably created the modern nostalgia blockbuster event. The Force had indeed awoken, and the world responded with enthusiasm. Chapter 8: The Reception, Critique, and Celebration. When the dust settled from opening weekend, it became clear that The Force Awakens wasn't just a box office hit. It was also largely a critical success and a fan pleaser. Professional film critics gave the movie glowing reviews in an overwhelming number. They praised its brisk pacing, its return to a fun, adventurous tone, and the likable new characters who held their own, alongside with the old icons. Entertainment Weekly's Chris Nashawity called it a roll-licking adventure wrapped in epic mythology, capturing how it balanced thrilling action with a large Star Wars lore. The Washington Post's Ann Hornaday wrote that The Force Awakens strikes all the right chords, emotional and narrative, to feel both familiar and exhilaratingly new. That phrase, familiar yet new, comes up a lot. Many felt the film cleverly mirrored the 1977 Star Wars, enough to hit nostalgic pleasure points, but you could say also introduced enough fresh elements to excite and surprise. A great deal of credit was given to J.J. Abrams for successfully reviving the franchise's spirit. The Telegraph UK critic Robbie Cullen said Abrams' film sets out to shake Star Wars from its slumber and reconnect the series with its much pined for past. That it achieves this both immediately and joyously is perhaps the single greatest relief of the movie-going year. Many reviews had a tone of pleasant relief that Star Wars was good again in a classic way. One review humorously noted that Abrams treated this worshipped pop culture franchise with respect and made it matter again. That quote highlights how Abrams managed to honor the source material without being slavish. The Times London even ventured to suggest while George Lucas came up with Star Wars, Abrams is a better action director and takes The Force Awakens into a more sophisticated territory. High praise, but very debatable. Importantly, critics and commenters also lauded the film's diverse cast and modern sensibilities. In 2015, it was significant that the new hero of Star Wars was a young woman, and one of the other leads was a black man, plus a Latino actor in Oscar Isaac. The New York Times critic Manola Dargis highlighted that Abrams presented a futuristic vision, a pluralistic world that the audience already lives in. She noted that Abrams is a Star Wars fanboy at heart. He hasn't made a film only for the true believers. He has made a film for everyone. This was evident to how many different kinds of viewers connected with the characters. In general, The Force Awakens was praised for updating Star Wars' cultural footprint to be more reflective of the real world's diversity while still delivering old-fashioned escapism. Fan reception initially was extremely enthusiastic. The film received an A cinema score from audiences, indicating they were satisfied. Many longtime fans were emotional about how The Force Awakens made them feel. It wasn't uncommon to hear anecdotes like, "I haven't felt this way watching Star Wars since I was a kid," or "This erased the bad taste of the prequels for me." The movie's blend of humor, heart, and nostalgia seemed to succeed in reuniting lapsed fans and newer fans under one big tent. Iconic moments like, spoiler alert, the death of Han Solo at the hands of his son Kylo Ren hit hard and became a major talking point. For many, it was a powerful, if heartbreaking story choice that gave film emotional weight and gave Harrison Ford the meaningful closure he had wanted for Han. Some fans were upset at losing Han, but mostly acknowledged it was dramatically effective. Carrie Fisher's older General Leia dealing with loss, and the gravitas Mark Hamill brought in his 30-second silent cameo also garnered praise. Even with minimal screen time, the original trio's presence was felt and appreciated. However, as the first rush of excitement settled, more nuanced critiques and discussions emerged. The most common critique, both from critics and some fans, was that The Force Awakens played it a bit too safe and was too derivative from the original 1977 film, A New Hope. Indeed, the film's structure, a young hero on a desert planet, an astromech droid carrying vital information, a planet-destroying superweapon to be blown up, etc., closely mirrors Episode 4. LA Review of Books snarkily dubbed it Toy Story The Force Awakens as nostalgia gone terribly right, implying it was selling comfort food nostalgia rather than original ideas. Others called it a soft reboot, essentially remaking Star Wars for a new generation with a coat of new paint. Notably, George Lucas Lucas himself voiced this criticism. In an interview after the premiere, Lucas said, "They wanted to do a retro movie. I don't like that." He pointed out that he tried to make every Star Wars film different, with new worlds and ideas, where The Force Awakens, in his view, relied on old tropes and had a retro feel. The new characters were very well received. Daisy Ridley's Rey in particular became an instant fan favorite and something of a modern feminist hero. Resourceful, brave, compassionate, and not over-sexualized or sidelined. There was some later debate over her quick mastery of Force skills, with labeling her as a Mary Sue, but in the moment, most audience members embraced her journey. John Boyega's Finn was widely praised for his humor and heart. He gave Star Wars something new by depicting a stormtrooper who gains a conscience and deflects. Adam Driver's performance at Kylo Ren also got positive notes. His unstable, angry young villain was seen as a refreshing change from the icy cool of Darth Vader. Kylo's inner conflict and the shock of him being Han and Leia's son added layers to the story that intrigued viewers. Critics also highlighted how The Force Awakens effectively blended action, humor, and emotional moments. The comedy beats, Finn and Poe's banter, BB-8's thumbs up, Han's famous line, "That's not how the Force works," landed well, reminiscent of the original trilogy's light touch. Meanwhile, the more profound moments, like the Han and Kylo confrontation on the catwalk, Rey summoning the lightsaber past Kylo in the snow, R2-D2 reawakening to complete the map to Luke, gave the film an emotional feel that struck with audiences after leaving the theater. Overall, the reception to The Force Awakens can be summarized as hugely positive with a side of measured critique. It succeeded in reigniting the widespread love for Star Wars. As the Daily Beast's Jen Yamato put it, the film was clearly written for fans who will quiver at every reference, every throwback nod. And indeed, many of us did, with delight. At the same time, some recognized that it leaned heavily on those old reference points and could have taken more risk. But immediate reactions tended to forgive that. The consensus was that after the prequels, playing a bit safe was acceptable, even welcomed. If it recaptured Star Wars' essence, which it did, just see it. You'll love it, wrote Wall Street Journal critic Joe Morgenstern plainly for a huge number of fans and critics that rang true. The Force Awakens was a return to a galaxy far, far away. Not flawless, perhaps a bit over fond of its heritage, but undeniably entertaining and emotionally satisfying. It set the stage for what it looked like to be a bright future for Star Wars on the screen. Chapter 9, The Legacy of The Force Awakens. Beyond its immediate success, The Force Awakens has a significant legacy in film and pop culture. Perhaps its most immediate legacy was proving that Star Wars could thrive without George Lucas at the helm. This was a huge question mark before 2015. Lucas's shadow loomed large, and some wondered if Star Wars would feel like Star Wars without his direct involvement. The Force Awakens answered that with a resounding yes, by respecting the elements Lucas created while telling a new story. It assured fans that the franchise was in good hands. In interviews post-release, Kathleen Kennedy and others expressed gratitude to Lucas, but also felt vindicated that the gamble paid off. From a business perspective, the film's $2 billion gross announced that Star Wars was not just back, but arguably bigger than ever. One could argue that Force Awakens paved the way for a new era of legacy sequels in Hollywood. A legacy sequel is a sequel made many years later that brings back the original characters to pass the torch to a new generation. The Force Awakens is a textbook example. It brought back Han, Leia, and eventually Luke, and introduced Rey, Finn, and Poe as the new heroes. Film critic Matt Singer even coined the term legacyquel around the time of The Force Awakens release, citing it as a prime example of this trend. The movie's triumph sent a clear message to Hollywood. Audiences love legacy sequels when done right. In the years following, we saw a boom in similar revivals. From Jurassic World, which actually came out in 2015, another huge hit with some original Jurassic Park cameos, to Blade Runner 2049, Halloween in 2018, and later on Top Gun Maverick in 2022. As one Collider article put it, the message was clear to Hollywood. People like legacy sequels where their old friends show up and say something cute about how they're back for one last ride. In fact, an insider listed The Force Awakens alongside Top Gun Maverick as prime examples examples of how profitable legacy sequels can be. Hollywood took note. Beloved franchises with aging stars got new leases on life. However, The Force Awakens also demonstrated the challenges of these sequels. One is the risk of over-reliance on nostalgia. Some critics felt The Force Awakens was borderline on that front. Another is the pressure to continue the story and satisfy audiences, something that the subsequent Star Wars sequels would struggle with, as we'll discuss in the next chapter. But purely as a single film's legacy, Episode 7 is often pointed to as the gold standard on how to revive a franchise. It respected its heritage, it casted talented fresh faces, and delivered what fans have been waiting for. It even had meta-textual moments that seemed to comment on the legacy. When Han Solo steps on the Falcon and says, "Chewie, we're home," it was really speaking to the audience's hearts. We're home too, back in this universe we love. The film's legacy also lives in its characters and iconography it created. Rey, Finn, Poe, and Kylo Ren became instantly recognizable names in the Star Wars pantheon. Rey's character inspired a wave of fan devotion. She became a role model for many young fans. Strong, brave, independent. Kylo Ren, with his crossguard lightsaber and volatile temper, became a pop culture icon of a different sort, spawning memes. The infamous Ben Swallow, shirtless Kylo Ren meme came later, but the seeds were here, and deep discussions about villain complexity. BB-8, the adorable rolling droid, proved that Star Wars could still design instantly marketable and lovable characters. BB-8 plushies and toys flew off the shelves, and BB-8 joined R2-D2 and C-3PO in the pantheon of beloved droids. In fact, The Force Awakens smartly positioned BB-8 alongside the old droids, as if handing off the baton to the new generation of droid sidekicks in this trilogy. Another facet of the film's legacy is how it brought Star Wars into the modern filmmaking era without losing its identity. Technically, it showed that you could use today's advanced efforts while maintaining a classic feel. Many blockbuster directors took note of Abrams' approach. For example, the Star Wars spin-off Rogue One in 2016 followed with a similar philosophy of blending practical sets and CGI, and was also well received. One could even argue The Force Awakens influenced non-Star Wars projects. Just like Creed in 2015, which came out only a month before The Force Awakens, it was a Rocky Legacy sequel from the same year, and later projects like Ghostbusters Afterlife, which clearly studied The Force Awakens playbook of homage plus new heroes. Yet the legacy is not without complication. In recent years since, as the entire sequel trilogy came out, some fans have reevaluated The Force Awakens. For many, it's still held in very high regard, often considered the most purely enjoyable of the trilogy, but some criticisms have grown louder over time. A frequent retrospective critique is that The Force Awakens set up a lot of mysteries: who is Rey's parents, what's up with Snoke, etc., without a clear plan for answers, effectively kicking the can down the road. Abrams known for his mystery box approach, and here he introduced some interesting threads. When the subsequent installments took those threads, it took them in unexpected directions, or decided to tie them up in a movie after that one. Some felt The Force Awakens might have been too concerned with setting up questions rather than giving a self-contained story. In fairness, as the first act of a trilogy, it functioned as intended, but its legacy is now tied to with how those follow-ups landed. One somewhat potent part of The Force Awakens' legacy is that it ended up being the final film appearance of Carrie Fisher as Leia that she saw released. Fisher passed away at the end of 2016 before filming any new scenes for Episode 9, though she appears in via repurposed footage. Thus, her performance in The Force Awakens carries some extra weight now. Fans treasure her scenes, especially the tender reunion and hug with Han, and her farewell moment with him, tragically their last in-story interaction. The film became a beautiful swan song for Han Solo as well, giving Han's fate in the story and Harrison Ford's likely final portrayal of the character. Actually, Harrison Ford's final portrayal of the character was in LEGO Star Wars The Force Awakens video game, fun fact. The Force Awakens provided a satisfying last adventure for those original heroes, which is a legacy of its own for fans who grew up with them. Another significant legacy aspect, The Force Awakens cemented Disney's approach to Star Wars, an approach that includes yearly releases, multiple projects, and cross-media storyline. After The Force Awakens' success, Disney swiftly released Rogue One the next year, which was also a hit, followed by more sequels and just continuing the Star Wars series as a whole. One could speculate that if The Force Awakens had underperformed or have been really ill-received, Disney might have slowed their plans. Instead, they doubled down. But that is a double-edged sword, as some argue that in years after, Star Wars became perhaps too much. Some say it had lost some luster, especially after the release of Solo: A Star Wars Story in 2018. The movie flopped, and then it didn't help that the sequel trilogy ultimately divided the fan base. But the confidence to expand the franchise, including the excellent offerings like The Mandalorian on Disney Plus, stems from the strong start with The Force Awakens. Culturally, The Force Awakens will be remembered as the film that brought Star Wars back to the forefront of global pop culture. For a whole generation of kids, this was their entry point to seeing Star Wars in theaters, just as the 1977 film is cherished by those who saw it new, and the prequels for those kids who grew up around 1999 to 2005. I was one of those kids. Attack of the Clones was my gateway into Star Wars, so I can't hate it. Despite it being probably the most widely criticized Star Wars film, I have a love for it, and I'm sure we are going to see a generation of fans who will aggressively defend this movie. The Force Awakens holds a special place for those who were young in 2015. Its legacy is being cemented as those fans grow older. You could already find people saying, The Force Awakens was the first Star Wars I saw in a cinema, and it made me a fan for life. One cannot talk about The Force Awakens' legacy without mentioning how it reignited the conversation on the value of nostalgia in storytelling. Some see it as a blueprint. Hitting the right nostalgic notes can recharge a franchise. Others caution that its heavy reliance on nostalgia set a template that maybe others followed too closely, leading to diminishing returns. But undeniably, it showed the incredible power of nostalgia when combined with good execution. Just look at the audience reactions to seeing the Millennium Falcon and hearing those old music cues. In summary, the legacy of The Force Awakens has a lot of layers. It rejuvenated a beloved saga, influenced an entire trend of legacy sequels, and left behind the characters and moments that have become part of a grand tapestry of Star Wars. As an event, it proved Star Wars was not only timeless, but adaptable to new eras. A few years after its release, reflecting on it, one writer summed it up nicely. It's safe to say their strategy worked. The Force Awakens was a record-smashing hit, well received by critics and audiences alike. For many purists, there was an above-all sense of relief that they haven't totally screwed things up, and that the pitfalls of the prequels had been avoided. That sense of relief and joy is perhaps its greatest legacy. It made millions of people fall in love with Star Wars all over again. Chapter 10, The Sequels, continuing the Skywalker saga. When The Force Awakens ended with that dramatic cliffhanger on Ahch-To, Rey offering Luke's lightsaber on that planet, audiences were desperate to know what happened next. Disney have already slated the follow-ups Episode 8, The Last Jedi for 2017, and Episode 9, The Rise of Skywalker for 2019. Thus, The Force Awakens became the launching pad for the rest of the sequel trilogy, a trilogy that would stir up far more controversy and fan debate than Episode 7 did by itself. In many ways, the success and challenges of the sequels trace back to what The Force Awakens set in motion. Episode 7 introduced mysteries and characters that the subsequent films had to develop and resolve. Episode 8, The Last Jedi, written and directed by Rian Johnson, deliberately took the story in an unexpected direction. It answered some of The Force Awakens mysteries in unorthodox ways. Rey's parents, for instance, were stated to be nobodies, subverting the expectation that she had a special lineage. Snoke, the shadowy big bad guy introduced in The Force Awakens, was unceremoniously killed off mid-film in The Last Jedi. The Last Jedi was highly acclaimed by many critics for its boldness and depth, myself included. It currently stands at a 91% on Rotten Tomatoes and was praised for expanding Star Wars thematically. However, it also split the fandom like never before. A segment of fans passionately disliked how The Last Jedi handled Luke Skywalker's character, portraying him as a broken man at first, and how it subverted or ignored some of the Force Awakens setups. Another segment absolutely loved the film for its subversions and emotional story, especially the Rey and Kylo Ren dynamic. This divide felt like Star Wars was back to where it was during the prequels. The Force Awakens' shiny unity gave way to intense debate. It's interesting to note some who initially adored The Force Awakens later retroactively critiqued it for not providing a stronger roadmap, given how differently Episode 8 turned out. Others, who maybe found The Force Awakens too safe, came to appreciate The Last Jedi's risk, and vice versa. So the sequel's evolving reception caused fans to reflect on The Force Awakens with new eyes. Still at the time, The Last Jedi's release in 2017, The Force Awakens was often remembered fondly as the fun adventure, where The Last Jedi was the challenging, divisive one. Episode 9, The Rise of Skywalker in 2019, attempted the task of wrapping up not just the sequel trilogy, but the entire 9-film Skywalker saga. J.J. Abrams returned to direct after Colin Trevorrow, originally slated for 9, departed over creative differences. The Rise of Skywalker tried to satisfy a fractured fan base by bringing back Emperor Palpatine, a development not hinted in The Force Awakens at all, and revealing Rey to be Palpatine's granddaughter, retconning The Last Jedi's nobody answer to fit a more classical Star Wars heritage twist. The film was jam-packed with action and nostalgia, much like The Force Awakens, but many felt it was somewhat incoherent or overstuffed. Critically, it received mixed reviews. By far the weakest critical reception of the sequels. It has around a 51% on Rotten Tomatoes. Fans too were split. Some enjoyed the frenetic pace and felt like it was an improvement after The Last Jedi, while others thought it undermined The Last Jedi or was just too rushed. So how does this reflect on The Force Awakens? In a sense, Episode 7 is now seen as the most universally liked of the sequel trilogy. It's the one that brought everyone in happily. Even if what followed caused some criticism, some fans say the sequel trilogy peaked with The Force Awakens, meaning that was the high point of pure enjoyment before things got messy for some. The trio of Rey, Finn, and Poe, who had great chemistry in The Force Awakens, well, Rey doesn't meet Poe until the end, but still, never actually share significant screen time altogether again until Episode 9, which is my personal favorite thing about that movie. Some feel it was a missed opportunity by waiting that long. Finn's character arc, so promising in The Force Awakens, arguably fizzled out in the later films. He's a bit sidelined in The Last Jedi and has a secondary arc in Rise of Skywalker. Poe got more development in The Last Jedi, but faced conflicts that some didn't agree with the handling of Luke, Snoke, etc. In The Last Jedi, retroactively made The Force Awakens mystery a point of contention. Did The Force Awakens set us up for disappointment by making Snoke mysterious when he'd just get killed? On the flip side, some argue that Rian Johnson's bold choices enriched the saga, and that The Force Awakens was playing it too safe. What's clear is that The Force Awakens laid a strong foundation of love for new characters, and the challenges in the sequels often came from decisions to deviate or course correct from that foundation. The trilogy as a whole, by the end, it had a bit of a disjointed feel due to different creative visions, and it had no singular roadmap. Abrams himself admitted later that in retrospect, it might have helped to have a plan for all 3 films from the start. Nonetheless, The Force Awakens is usually not blamed for these issues. If anything, fans tend to wish the later movies had been closer to the spirit or the setups of The Force Awakens. For example, many were hoping to see more of the Knights of Ren. They were vaguely referenced in The Force Awakens, or have a deeper explanation of how the First Order rose to power. Threads that The Force Awakens opened, but the sequels didn't fully explore to everyone's satisfaction. One concrete way to measure The Force Awakens versus its sequels is the audience staying around. The Last Jedi, despite controversy, still earned a $1.33 billion globally, significantly less than The Force Awakens' $2 billion, but still huge, and The Rise of Skywalker dropped further to around $1.07 billion, barely half of The Force Awakens haul. That trajectory, each film making less than the one before, was the reverse of the original trilogy, which gained momentum, and shows how the initial enormous interest gave way to some audience maybe dropping off as the trilogy progressed. Arguably, The Force Awakens set a bar so high in hype and goodwill that it was hard for follow-ups to match. It's likely impossible to replicate that initial wave of excitement anyway. Episode 7 was a unique moment. Still, taken together, the sequel trilogy did bring Star Wars to a new generation. All three films, despite varying reactions, kept Star Wars in the cultural conversation continuously from 2015 to 2019. Rey, Finn, Poe, and Kylo's stories concluded in The Rise of Skywalker in a somewhat bittersweet way. Not everyone loved how it ended, with Rey taking the Skywalker name, etc., but it did provide closure to the saga's main lineage. The Force Awakens, as the first act of this trilogy, is now often seen as the nostalgia, joyful reunion before the traumatic twists and turns of the later acts. Some fans say it remains their favorite of the three because it's the one that felt most like Star Wars, and it didn't leave them with mixed feelings. Others, however, might favor The Last Jedi for being daring, or Rise of Skywalker for its frenetic conclusion, but that's personal taste. In terms of narrative through-line, The Force Awakens established themes and generational change, legacy, and the allure of myth. The sequels grapple with those themes in varying ways. Notably, The Last Jedi challenged the idea of legacy by having Luke initially reject the legend status thrust upon him, and Kylo telling Rey to let the past die. Many saw this as a pushback against The Force Awakens nostalgia, but in Rise of Skywalker, there was an almost overcorrection to embrace the legacy, with Palpatine's return and Rey literally adopting the Skywalker legacy. Thus, the trilogy had a bit of thematic whiplash, reflecting different directional viewpoints. For The Force Awakens, its legacy among the sequels is a bit like A New Hope among the originals. It's the adventurous opener that did the heavy lifting of world rebuilding and introducing characters, leaving the deeper dramatic heavy lifting to the next episodes. Interestingly, in fan polls and discussions nowadays, The Force Awakens often ranks pretty high, frequently above Rise of Skywalker, and sometimes above Last Jedi, depending on the group and personal taste, of course. In conclusion for this chapter, the sequel trilogy's journey was a roller coaster, but it all began with the huge liftoff that was The Force Awakens. Episode 7's triumph sets the stage, while the follow-ups had a rockier road. They still delivered memorable moments and concluded the Skywalker saga, whether one loved, hated, or felt mixed about. The Last Jedi and Rise of Skywalker, most would agree that The Force Awakens did its job exceptionally well. It brought Star Wars back, as we keep saying, and in doing so, it handed off this beloved universe to a new era, for better or worse. The sequels as a whole will be discussed and debated for years. They are already a frequent topic of fan discourse, but The Force Awakens typically stands as the most broadly appreciated chapter of the three, remembered for the promise it ignited on day one of this new saga. Conclusion. My personal journey inspired by The Force Awakens. I want to close this long exploration on a personal note, because for me, Star Wars The Force Awakens is not just a movie, it's a time capsule of inspiration, a turning point in my own life. When I think of this film, I'm flooded with emotion, memories, and gratitude, because it truly changed the trajectory of my passions. Back in 2015, I was just an young, avid Star Wars fan, eagerly awaiting the movie like everyone else. I remember the chills when that first trailer hit. Seeing the Falcon soar again made my heart leap. And when I finally saw the film, it really was pure magic for me. I laughed at Finn and Poe's banter, I gripped my seat during the lightsaber duels, I teared up when Han walked onto that Falcon, and even when Rey did summon the Skywalker saber. The Force Awakens did something more than just to entertain me for 2 hours. It ignited a spark of creativity and community in me that I haven't felt before. In the days and weeks after seeing it, I was overflowing with excitement and ideas. The movie had brought back that feeling of play and imagination I had as a kid with Star Wars action figures, for example. Suddenly, I found myself wanting to create and share that joy with others. I started a humble little Facebook page dedicated to Star Wars memes, discussions, and just content as a whole. At first, it was just for fun, posting my thoughts and just making funny jokes. To my surprise, people responded. The page grew. Fellow fans engaged in debates and geeked out with me. It was like recapturing that sense of what Star Wars did, bringing people together, just as it done with the movie. Not long after, I got an even crazier idea. I was a fan of pro wrestling video games like the WWE 2K series, and I thought, why not mash that up with Star Wars? So I created a Star Wars themed wrestling show in a wrestling video game, complete with custom characters of Jedi and Sith, championships, storylines, etc. It was utterly goofy and niche, but it was so much fun. I'd have Darth Vader versus Kylo Ren, or Luke versus Han Solo, all simulated in the game engine. I recorded these, added commentary, and put them online. To my delight, a small community formed around it. We'd all tune in and watch these absurd, yet awesome crossovers, and it became a little episodic series. Now this might sound crazy, a Facebook page and a 2K wrestling parody, but for me, it was transformative. The Force Awakens laid the groundwork that pushed me from consuming media to creating content. It awakened me, no pun intended. It created a passion for content creation, for entertaining others and building a community. I didn't fully realize that I wanted something like that beforehand. I found that I loved it. I loved brainstorming new post or video ideas, loved interacting with fans who enjoyed what I made. It gave me a sense of purpose and confidence in my creativity. Over time, that passion grew. I taught myself video editing so I can make better clips. I learned how to moderate discussions and collaborate with other creators. Eventually, what started as a giddy post-movie reaction turned into a serious aspiration. I realized I wanted to be a content creator. I wanted to keep making things that make people happy, spark conversations, or just bring a little joy to someone's day, just as The Force Awakens had done for me. Without The Force Awakens, I don't know if I would have found that path. It sounds almost silly to attribute so much to this legacy sequel in a blockbuster franchise, but that's the beauty of art and stories. You never know where inspiration will strike. For me, it struck like lightning when I watched Rey take her first steps on that journey, when I felt that communal excitement of Star Wars returning. It did unlock something in me. Looking back now a decade later, I could trace a direct line from the night I saw The Force Awakens to the career and hobbies I have today. That movie made me feel like a wide-eyed kid again, dreaming up adventures, and I would carry that energy forward. It led me to build a community that is active to this day. It led me to craft bizarre yet delightful creative projects, and eventually I would pursue content creation professionally. In many ways, The Force Awakens was the catalyst for me finding my passion and my voice. So yes, on paper, it's just a movie, a big, fun space adventure. But like I said before, art has a way of touching our lives in unexpected ways. The Force Awakens arrived at a time when I needed that spark. It reminded me to embrace what I love unabashedly, and to share that love with others. It taught me that even a continuation of an old saga can create new beginnings. In the film, it was for the characters. In reality, it was for people like me discovering new parts of ourselves. Every time I rewatch The Force Awakens, I not only get swept up in the thrill all over again, but I also get a bit emotional, thinking about how much has changed for me since its release. I see Finn picking up that lightsaber despite the odds, and I think of having the courage to try new things. I see Rey realizing the Force's in her, and I think of discovering latent talents. I see Han Solo mentoring these people, and I think of the mentors and friends who encouraged me on my content journey. And I see that final scene, Rey offering the lightsaber to Luke, and it does hit me as a metaphor. Passing the torch, embracing the future, while honoring the past. In a way, Star Wars passed its torch to a new generation with that film. And I like to think I caught a little piece of that light. To some, that all might have sounded so dumb and overly sentimental. I get it. But you never know what will move you or motivate you. It is why I still go to the movies to this day. It could be a profound indie film. It might be a mega budget space opera sequel that rekindles your dormant creative flame. Inspiration is everywhere. You just have to open your eyes. And for me, it was in that galaxy far, far away where I found inspiration. The Force Awakens will always hold a special, almost sacred place in my heart for that reason. It's a marker of when I found my calling. It symbolizes the moment I went from audience member to participant, from someone who just loves stories to someone who wants to tell stories. And I know I'm not alone. I've met others who pursued art, filmmaking, cosplay, or writing because of Star Wars. And some, it was because of this revival. It brought so many of us together in 2015, and it does continue to do so today. And I want to just say as a message, always be open-minded. Talk to your friends. See what they're into. Provide what you're into to your friends and family. Always just keep an eye open, because you never know. So as I finish this giant video, I do so with a profound gratitude. Gratitude to the filmmakers and actors who made The Force Awakens with such heart that it resonated worldwide. Gratitude to the friends and fellow fans who shared in that magical time and encouraged my creative endeavors after. And gratitude to Star Wars itself, a saga that, even in a legacy sequel, proved that the power of myth and adventure can be renewed and can ignite the spark of hope and creativity in a new era. In the end, The Force Awakens isn't just episode 7 of a blockbuster saga to me. It's the chapter where I too, no pun intended once again, awaken to new possibilities, to a community of fandom, and to the passion that now guides my life. And that, more than box office records or reviews or anything, is its true legacy in my story. So I do say thank you to Star Wars The Force Awakens for being the film that brought us all home again, and for helping me find where I belong, in a galaxy I might have never explored otherwise. Thank you all for watching this crazy video idea I had where I talked in depth of The Force Awakens. I hope you all enjoy it, and I hope you all continue to follow me on my journey. Remember to subscribe to Face the Ace and check out my weekly podcast, At the Movies with Ace and Martin, which does come out every week. And make sure to go to Shockwave Sports if you are actually interested in that crazy 2K series I was talking about, because that Star Wars wrestling show laid the groundwork for what we are creating over at Shock Wrestling as a series. It's a really fun time. Trust me, even if you're not that much into wrestling, you're gonna find it really entertaining. Thank you all for watching, and I will see you all in the next video.